Imagine this. A single voyage, pushing out across totally unknown seas. What if that one journey could change everything? Not just trade, but global power, the whole course of history. That's what we're exploring today, the life and the impact of a name everyone knows from the Age of Discovery, Vasco da Gama. We want to shed light on some surprising details, the incredible navigation involved, and also the, let's say, complicated and often controversial legacy he left behind. And joining me to navigate these historical waters is our expert guide. Okay, let's set the scene. Before da Gama even hoisted a sail, what was going on with Portugal? What were they really aiming for with these huge, ambitious explorations?
Well, you have to remember, Portugal had been pushing down the African coast since the early 1400s. Prince Henry the Navigator was a big driver behind that. Initially, it was mostly about looking for gold, maybe slaves, and they learned a lot about sailing, mapped coasts, but it wasn't bringing in huge profit.
Right, so it was groundwork, but not the big payoff yet.
Exactly. The real change came with King John II in 1481. His vision was different. He wanted to fill the royal coffers through trade. Specifically, he wanted to break the Venetian monopoly on the spice trade. That trade was incredibly profitable, but it all came overland through the Middle East, controlled by Venice.
Ah, the famous spice trade. So the goal was a sea route.
Precisely. A direct sea route around Africa to India. That was the prize. And pieces were already falling into place. In 1487, the king sent out spies Pero de Covillan and Afonso de Paiva.
Spies, overland.
Yes, overland. Their job was to check out the actual spice markets, see how it all worked in East Africa and India, get intelligence on the ground. Then, just the next year, 1488, Bartolome Diaz had this huge breakthrough. He actually managed to sail around the southern tip of Africa.
The Cape of Good Hope.
That's the one. He made it as far as the Fish River in modern South Africa. So suddenly you have Diaz proving the sea route is physically possible, at least around Africa. And you have Covillan sending back reports confirming the riches of logistics from the Indian side.
So all the separate pieces were there. They just needed someone to connect them across that huge ocean.
Exactly. They needed someone to make that final massive leap across the Indian Ocean and establish the trade route. That's where da Gama comes in.
Okay, so let's turn to that voyage, the one that really did change everything. Tell us about the preparations. Setting off from Lisbon, July 8th, 1497, right?
That's the date. It was a carefully assembled fleet. 4 ships in total. You had 2 big ships, carracks, built for the journey. The San Gabriel, which da Gama himself commanded, and a San Rafael, led by his brother Paulo. Then there was a smaller, quicker caravel, the Berrio, under Nicolau Coelho, and a dedicated supply ship. The crew was about 170 men. It was a serious undertaking.
And this is where it gets, well, mind-boggling for me. How did he navigate? They're sailing into the completely unknown, vast ocean.
It was an extraordinary piece of seamanship and, frankly, nerve. They followed the known coast down to about Sierra Leone. Then da Gama made a really bold move. Instead of hugging the coast, he steered southwest out into the open Atlantic, way out.
Away from land entirely.
To catch the winds. He was using the knowledge Diaz had gained about the South Atlantic westerlies. He sailed south, crossed the equator, swung back east, aiming for the tip of Africa. Think about this. Over 10,000 kilometers, that's about 6,000 miles, on the open ocean without seeing land.
Wow.
It was the longest voyage out of sight of land ever recorded up to that point. They finally made landfall again on November 4th, 1497. And as they sailed past the coast around Christmas time, they named it Natal.
Natal for Christmas, birth of Christ. Makes sense. So after that immense stretch at sea, they start making stops along the East African coast. What was the reception like there? These were established trading centers.
It was, let's say, mixed and often tense. First stop, Mozambique, March 1498. Da Gama tried to pass himself off as a Muslim to get an audience with the Sultan. It didn't really work.
Why not?
Well, the trade goods he brought were apparently quite poor, not impressive at all. Locals got suspicious. They were forced to leave. And as they left, da Gama actually ordered his ships to fire cannons into the city. Not a great start.
No kidding. Retaliation already. What about Mombasa?
Mombasa, April 98. Things got worse. They basically resorted to piracy, looting unarmed Arab merchant ships nearby. Unsurprisingly, they were met with hostility in Mombasa itself and had to leave pretty quickly.
So hostility, suspicion, did they find anyone friendly?
Finally, yes. In Malindi, later that April, the ruler there was actually in conflict with Mombasa, so he saw the Portuguese as potential allies. It was a much friendlier reception. And crucially, absolutely crucially, they found a pilot in Malindi, someone who knew the monsoon winds needed to cross the Indian Ocean.
Ah, the key they needed. And then India, the arrival. Tell us about that moment, May 20th, 1498.
Yes, they landed near Kozhikode, which is also known as Calicut back then, a major trading hub on the Malabar coast. The local ruler, the Zamorin, initially gave them a, well, quite grand reception. There was a procession, something like 3,000 armed Nair warriors.
Impressive. What did Da Gama say they were there for?
His famous line was, "In search of Christians and spices," which is interesting because, well, there weren't many Christians there in the way he expected. He even apparently mistook a Hindu temple for a Christian church, thinking a goddess image was the Virgin Mary. A bit of a cultural mix-up there.
So, some initial confusion. Did the diplomacy improve?
Not really. It fell apart pretty fast. The gifts Da Gama brought from the Portuguese king, things like scarlet cloaks, hats, basic stuff like sugar, oil, they were seen as completely inadequate. Trivial, almost insulting to a wealthy ruler like the Zamorin.
Ouch, compared to the riches flowing through Calicut.
Exactly. And the established Muslim merchants there saw Da Gama as a rival, a pirate even, and likely advised the Zamorin against him. Things got really tense when the Zamorin insisted on customs duties being paid in gold, which the Portuguese didn't really have. It ended badly. Da Gama basically had to make a quick exit, and he forcibly took several locals, Nairs and fishermen, with him as hostages.
Wow. So, a complete failure on the diplomatic front, really. He just didn't understand the context or bring the right approach. That must have made for an anxious journey home.
Anxious and incredibly difficult. The return journey was horrific. They left India in late August 1498. But Da Gama seems to have ignored the local advice about the monsoon winds. He tried to sail against them.
A bad mistake.
A terrible mistake. The crossing back over the Indian Ocean took over 3 months. 90 days. Remember, it only took 23 days to get there with the right winds. Scurvy absolutely ravaged the crew. About half the men died on the way back.
So many died, they didn't even have enough men to sail all the ships. They had to scuttle, deliberately sink the San Rafael off the African coast. They finally limped back into Malindi in January 1499. Da Gama put up a stone pillar there, the Vasco da Gama pillar. You can still see it today.
Amazing it's still there. And the return to Portugal. The ships got separated. Coelho on the Berrio raced ahead and reached Lisbon first, July 10, 1499, carrying the news. Da Gama himself was delayed. His brother Paulo was gravely ill. Da Gama stayed with him in the Azores, where Paulo died and was buried. So Vasco didn't get back to Lisbon until late August or early September.
A somber return for him personally.
Very. But despite losing 2 ships, over half the men, and failing to get a trade treaty, the small amount of spices they did bring back proved the route was viable. The potential profits were immense. And that's the key takeaway. It wasn't just reaching India, it was opening that direct sea route. It paved the way for the annual Portuguese India Armadas, the colonization of key ports. It changed everything.
So despite the hardship, the loss of life, the diplomatic stumbles, Da Gama comes back a hero in Portugal, right?
Yeah.
What kind of rewards did he get for essentially proving this route?
Oh, absolutely. King Manuel, I was clearly thrilled with the potential. Da Gama was showered with honors. He was granted the town of Sines, his birthplace, as a hereditary fief, although that got complicated with the Order of Santiago, who technically owned it. It actually led him to switch orders later to the Order of Christ in 1507, partly to secure his status.
So land and status.
And money. A huge hereditary royal pension, 300,000 reis, plus the noble title of Dom forever for him and his family. This was massive. It elevated him to the nobility. And then, in 1502, came the really grand title. Admiral of the Seas of Arabia, Persia, India, and all the Orient.
Quite a mouthful.
It certainly was. And importantly, he also got the personal right to command any future fleet heading to India if he chose.
Okay, so he's now Admiral Da Gama, loaded with titles. What prompts the second voyage? Was it just about trade this time?
No, the context was very different, much darker. While Da Gama was away, the next Portuguese expedition, led by Pedro Álvares Cabral, had gone to Kozhikode. Things went badly wrong. There was conflict, the Portuguese trading post or factory was destroyed, and many Portuguese were killed. Cabral retaliated, bombarded the city. Essentially, Portugal was now at war with Kozhikode.
So the second voyage was punitive.
Absolutely. Da Gama invoked his right to command the 4th India Armada in 1502. This wasn't an exploration fleet, it was a war fleet. 15 heavily armed ships, 800 men. The goal was clear, revenge, and to force the Zamorin into submission. It was also a family affair. His cousin, his uncles commanded parts of the fleet. Stakes were high for the Da Gama name now.
This is where the story takes a really grim turn, isn't it? His methods on this second voyage are notorious.
They are. And one incident stands out above all others for its brutality. The Pilgrim Ship Incident, October 1502. Da Gama's fleet intercepted a ship called the Miram. It was carrying Muslim pilgrims returning from Mecca to Kozhikode. Hundreds of people, maybe over 400, including women and children.
What did he do?
He looted the ship first, then he ordered all the pilgrims locked below deck, and he set the ship on fire.
Burn them alive.
Burned them alive. Reports say they offered him everything they owned, pleaded for mercy. He refused. Only about 20 children were supposedly spared, and that was on condition they convert to Christianity.
That's horrifying. Pure terror tactics.
It was, and his actions in Kozhikode were just as brutal. He demanded the Zamorin expel all Muslims from the city. When that didn't happen, he captured some fishermen, supposedly intercepted a high priest he accused of being a spy, and mutilated them horribly, cutting off lips, ears, noses, even sewing dogs' ears onto the priest's head before sending the body parts ashore.
It's hard to reconcile this with the image of an explorer.
It is. He then bombarded the city, which was largely unfortified, for almost 2 days straight. He captured merchant ships carrying rice, cut off the crew's hands, ears, and noses, and sent them to the Zamorin with a note demanding compensation. He did win a naval battle against the Zamorin's fleet, and he managed to load spices by making alliances with Kozhikode's rivals, Cochin and Cananor.
So militarily effective in a
Yeah.
brutal way.
Yes. He returned to Portugal in 1503. He hadn't completely broken the Zamorin, but he had established Portugal's dominance through sheer, terrifying force. It set a pattern. His fame is definitely marked by this ruthlessness.
After that brutal second voyage, he seems to step back for a while. What was he doing for the next 20 years or so?
Yeah, he entered a sort of semi-retirement. He lived a quieter life. Apparently wasn't always that welcome at court. Maybe his methods were a bit much even for them, or perhaps his usefulness had peaked for the moment. He did try to solidify his status, switching to the Order of Christ, as we mentioned, but it wasn't until 1518 that he really came back into focus. He threatened to leave Portugal and offer his services to Castile, Spain. A classic power play.
And it worked.
It did. King Manuel I, who had maybe been keeping him at arm's length, finally relented and granted him a proper feudal title in 1519, the first Count of Vitiguera, a significant noble rank.
So he got his title, and then one last trip to India.
One final voyage, yes. In 1524, King Manuel had died, and his successor, John III, was facing problems in India. Reports of corruption under the governor there, Duarte de Meneses. John III decided he needed a strong, authoritative figure, so he appointed da Gama, now Count of Vitiguera, as Viceroy of India, a very powerful position.
Viceroy. So he's going back as the top man.
Exactly. He set out in April 1524 with 14 ships. 2 of his sons went with him. There was a strange incident on the way out, near India, some kind of underwater earthquake. The sea apparently churned violently. Ships were tossed around.
That's been terrifying.
Only da Gama kept his cool, rallied the men, saying something like, "Rejoice, friends, even the sea trembles before us." Classic da Gama bravado, perhaps.
But his time as viceroy was short.
Very short. He arrived in India, started trying to sort out the administration and impose order, but he contracted malaria. He died in Cochin, India, on Christmas Eve, 1524, just 3 months after arriving.
And the story of where he's actually buried is complicated.
It's quite the saga. Initially, he was buried right there in Cochin in St. Francis Church. Then in 1539, his remains were brought back to Portugal, to Vitiguera, the land connected to his title, apparently in quite a fancy casket. Fast forward to 1880. Big national ceremony. His supposed remains are moved to the Geronimos Monastery in Belém, Lisbon, a place of national heroes.
Okay, seems straightforward enough.
But then just 4 years later, a historian finds documents suggesting they moved the wrong body from Vitiguera back in 1880, possibly his great-grandson's remains.
You're kidding.
Apparently not. There was another tomb nearby that seemed more likely. So in 1898, they moved the remains from that tomb to the monastery, hoping they got it right this time. And just to add another layer, there was even a claim in the 1990s that his real bones might still be hidden somewhere else entirely on the original estate. So who knows for sure?
What a story. So when you put it all together, the incredible navigator, the ruthless enforcer, the titles, the controversies, even the mystery around his bones, how do we sum up his legacy? What's the lasting impact?
He's undoubtedly one of history's most significant explorers. He's pivotal to Portugal becoming a major colonial power. That astute mix of politics and war, as one historian put it, fundamentally changed the Indian Ocean world. But you can't separate the achievement from the methods. His fame is forever tied to the brutality, the Pilgrim ship incident being the most glaring example. He's both celebrated and condemned.
And its cultural presence.
It's huge, especially in Portugal. Camões' national epic, or Lusíadas, centers on his voyage. There are operas, paintings, but also critiques, like the South African jazz musician Hugh Masekela's song Vasco da Gama, the Sailor Man, with the line Vasco da Gama was no friend of mine. It reflects that anti-colonial perspective.
And places named after him.
All over the world, the huge bridge in Lisbon, the Tower shopping center, the city of Vasco da Gama in Goa, India, even a crater on the moon. Sports teams, too. And incredibly, we're still finding things. In 2016, they confirmed the wreck of the Esmeralda, a ship from his 1502 fleet, sunk off Oman.
Wow, finding artifacts from that voyage now.
Exactly. These like rare coins, cannonballs marked with his uncle's initials who commanded that part of the fleet. These finds keep adding details, keep the story alive, connecting us back to those voyages.
It's quite something. From navigating into the complete unknown, opening up global trade routes, helping forge an empire, the consequences were just immense, weren't they? It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? How do we balance that sheer ambition, that drive for exploration, against the really harsh, often brutal realities of what followed? Especially when those consequences have rippled down through history for centuries. Thank you for joining us on this exploration today.